I always thought betrayal would feel like a scream, like an explosion, like a single moment that tears your life in half. But when I discovered my husband's secret, it wasn't a scream that came first, it was silence. A thick, suffocating silence that felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. It started with something so small, so stupid, that I almost ignored it. We'd been married for 8 years, and by now I thought I could read him like a favorite book. I knew when he was stressed, when he was happy, when he was keeping something to himself. Lately, though, there had been shifts. Subtle, but undeniable. The way he angled his phone screen away from me when he texted. The way he stayed late at work, but came home smelling faintly of perfume I didn't own. The way he seemed present, but distant, like he was already living in another life where I wasn't invited. It wasn't the kind of marriage that made headlines or gossip. We were quiet people. No kids yet, though we'd tried. A little two-bedroom house on a quiet street, a dog we adored, weekend coffee dates, family dinners with his sister, my parents visiting once every few months. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. Or maybe I just needed to believe that. Because if we weren't solid, what was I building my life on? The first real crack came on a Wednesday night. He was in the shower, and his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally I don't check his phone. I never had a reason to. Trust was our foundation, or at least I thought it was. But something about that buzzing made my stomach twist. Call it instinct, call it paranoia, but my hand moved before I could think. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Anna. The message preview was short, but sharp, like a blade. I miss you already. I froze. At first, I thought maybe it was innocent. A coworker joking around, a friend. But the tone, it was intimate. I felt my pulse in my ears. The sound of the shower running in the background suddenly felt like a countdown. I opened the message thread. What I saw made my breath catch. Dozens of messages, weeks of them. Conversations about late-night meetings that weren't meetings, little heart emojis, plans for weekends I thought he'd spent working, and pictures of them together, him smiling in ways he hadn't smiled with me in months. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I couldn't even cry at first. The betrayal was too heavy, like my body hadn't processed it yet. He came out of the shower a few minutes later, towel around his waist, humming to himself. He looked so normal, so familiar, that I almost convinced myself to put the phone down and pretend I hadn't seen a thing. But something in me snapped. I was tired of pretending everything was okay. I didn't say anything right away. I handed him the phone, opened to the thread. His humming stopped mid-note. His eyes darted from me to the screen, then back to me. His face went pale. "Where did you—" he started, but his voice cracked. I didn't answer. I just stood there, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. He said, "Listen, it's not what it looks like." That phrase, that pathetic, cliched phrase. My anger finally boiled over. Really? Because it looks like you've been screwing another woman for months. It looks exactly like that. He tried to speak, to explain, to twist the narrative into something palatable, but I was beyond reason. I'd been loyal, patient, forgiving, and now I was humiliated. But the real shock hadn't even hit me yet. Because when I finally confronted him about who this woman was, he hesitated. That hesitation was worse than a confession. It was guilt. It was fear. It was confirmation that this betrayal went deeper than I realized. And when I learned her identity, it would shatter me in ways I couldn't imagine.
The shift was subtle at first, the kind of thing you could dismiss as paranoia if you wanted to, and for a while I did. I told myself she was tired from work, that the tension in her shoulders wasn't anger but stress, that the late nights were just part of a new project. It was easier to believe those stories than to face the unease crawling under my skin every time I saw her smile at her phone. But deep down, Something in me knew. The first thing I noticed was her perfume. It was different, lighter, sweeter, something she'd never worn before. She brushed it off, said it was a free sample from a coworker, but I caught her wearing it on nights she claimed she was working late. Then there were the clothes, outfits I'd never seen her wear to work before. Tops that dipped a little lower, skirts that clung a little tighter. She was dressing up for someone, and I had a sinking feeling it wasn't me. Her phone became her lifeline, glued to her hand like it contained the secrets of the universe. She started keeping it face down on the table, a habit she never had before. She changed her password, claiming it was because of a company-wide security policy. She even started taking it with her into the shower. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. I tried to remember that I loved her and that love meant trust. But love also meant I knew her. Every quirk, every habit, every detail. And this wasn't her. Not the woman I'd married. We used to have rituals, little things that felt like anchors in the chaos of life. Morning coffee together, Sunday breakfast at the diner down the street, late night conversations about nothing at all. But lately, she was too tired, too busy, too distracted. She'd come home, mumble something about deadlines, and retreat to the bedroom with her laptop. Even when she was next to me on the couch, she felt miles away. I'd try to talk to her, and she'd respond with distracted nods, half-hearted smiles. Her laughter, once so easy and warm, now sounded forced, like she was performing for me out of obligation. One night, I woke up around 2 in the morning and found her sitting on the edge of the bed, illuminated by the glow of her phone. She didn't notice me watching. She was smiling, not the polite smile she gave me lately, but a real, genuine smile, the kind she used to save just for me. Her fingers moved quickly over the screen, typing something that made her bite her lip and giggle softly. I wanted to ask her who she was talking to. I wanted to demand answers. But instead, I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep, my heart pounding in my chest. The distance between us grew like a shadow. She started working out more, something she never cared about before. She'd come home with her hair styled differently, with a glow that didn't come from me. She started wearing new lingerie, pieces I'd never seen her in before. And when I asked about them, she shrugged and said she just wanted to feel good about herself. I told her she looked beautiful, because she did. But inside, I felt like I was watching her slip away, piece by piece. I started noticing inconsistencies in her stories. She'd say she was working late, but I'd call her office, and they'd tell me she left hours ago. She'd say she was out with coworkers, but her phone would be off for hours at a time. Once, I caught the faint scent of cologne on her coat. Not mine, not anyone I knew. When I mentioned it, she laughed it off, said she hugged a colleague who wore too much. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the voice in my head wouldn't shut up. The fight started small, over little things like who forgot to take out the trash or why I didn't answer her texts quickly enough. But underneath the arguments was a current of something darker. She was defensive, quick to anger, and quicker to retreat. Whenever I brought up how distant she'd become, she'd accuse me of being paranoid, of overthinking. And maybe I was. Maybe I'd always been the kind of person who noticed too much, read too deeply into things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing my wife. I started paying closer attention, collecting mental notes like a detective. What time she left the house, how long she stayed out, the way her smile lingered after certain texts. I even began scrolling through her social media, something I'd never done before. There weren't any obvious clues, no smoking gun, but there were gaps, blank spaces that told their own story. Posts from nights she said she was out, but no photos of her there. Friends tagging each other in places she claimed to be, but no mention of her being there. It was like she'd erased herself from her own life. One evening, I decided to surprise her.
The days that followed were a blur, a haze of polite smiles and conversations that barely scratched the surface of what was really happening. I tried to keep my composure, to bury the truth deep inside and pretend that everything was normal. but I felt like a ghost in my own life. At work, I stared at my computer screen for hours without registering a single word, my fingers tapping at the keyboard just to keep up appearances. My coworkers noticed something was off, but no one dared to ask. Maybe they thought I was just tired, stressed. I wished it were that simple. At home, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of her movement, every soft chime of her phone sent my pulse racing. I would catch myself watching her like a stranger, memorizing her every gesture, every glance, every carefully chosen word. She was distant, but not cold, polite, attentive even, like she was overcompensating. It made me sick. This wasn't my wife. Or maybe it was, and I was only just now seeing her clearly. One evening I came home late. She was already in bed, her phone on the nightstand, screen dark. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching her breathe. Her face looked peaceful in the dim light, her hair spread out on the pillow like a halo. I wanted to hate her, to feel rage so powerful it would drown out the hurt. But all I felt was emptiness, like something essential had been ripped out of me. I turned away and slept on the couch. The couch became my refuge. I told her I'd fallen asleep watching TV, that I didn't want to wake her. She didn't press me, didn't ask questions. That silence between us felt louder than any argument. It was a careful dance we were doing, both of us pretending not to see the cracks splintering our marriage. But I couldn't keep pretending forever. One night, after she'd gone to bed, I poured myself a drink and sat in the kitchen, staring at the dark window. I thought about our vows, the promises we made when we were too young to understand what it would take to keep them. I thought about the early days of our relationship, the laughter, the way she'd sneak her cold feet under me in bed just to hear me squeal. That woman felt like a dream now, a memory that belonged to someone else's life. I reached for her phone. It wasn't locked this time. My hand shook as I scrolled through her messages. At first, there was nothing suspicious. Work chats, family updates, a group thread with friends. But then I saw his name, just a single initial, a man I didn't know. My heart thudded in my chest as I opened their conversation. It wasn't explicit, not in the obvious way, but there was a tone there, a warmth, a closeness that cut me deeper than any explicit message ever could. She trusted him. She confided in him. She told him things about her day she hadn't mentioned to me. He knew when she was happy, when she was frustrated, when she was tired, and I realized with a sickening jolt that she had built an entire world with this man, a world I wasn't part of. The last message was sent just an hour earlier. Can't wait to see you again. I miss your voice. I dropped the phone like it burned me. I sat there in the dark kitchen, staring at nothing, my chest tight with rage and despair. She was asleep upstairs, oblivious. I thought about waking her, confronting her, demanding answers, but a voice in my head told me to wait, to gather proof, to be smart. So I waited. Over the next week, I watched her like a predator stalking prey. I memorized her schedule, noted every late night at work, every coffee with a friend. I checked her phone when I could, piecing together the truth one text at a time. The picture became clearer, and so was my resolve. One evening, I followed her. I told her I had to work late, kissed her on the cheek, and left 15 minutes after she did. I kept my distance, my heart pounding in my ears, as I trailed her car through quiet streets. She wasn't going to the office. She wasn't meeting a friend. She drove to a small apartment complex on the other side of town. I parked down the street and watched her get out of the car, smoothed her hair, and hurried inside. My hands clenched the steering wheel so hard they ached. I sat there for an hour, staring at that door, imagining what was happening behind it. When she finally emerged, her hair was slightly tousled, her lipstick smudged. She looked happy. I followed her home, my mind a storm of anger and heartbreak. When she walked through the door, she smiled at me, said she was tired, and went straight to shower. I sat in the living room, staring at the TV without turning it on. She didn't know I'd followed her. She didn't know I'd seen everything. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until I had enough evidence to crush every lie, every excuse. She had chosen to betray me, to humiliate me, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. But I also knew this. Once I exposed her, there would be no going back.
Morning light crept through the blinds, slicing the bedroom into narrow strips of gray. It felt like I hadn't slept in days, though the clock said only a few hours had passed. My mind was still a mess of unanswered questions and jagged images, my wife's uneasy smile, the glow of her phone screen in the dark, the way she pulled away when I reached for her. Every detail replayed in my head like a broken record, looping until I was numb. She moved quietly in the kitchen, humming a tune I didn't recognize. The sound made me flinch. It was too cheerful for the heaviness that hung between us, too light for the suspicion gnawing at me. She poured herself coffee and smiled as I entered, her face perfectly calm, perfectly composed. "Morning," she said, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't spent half the night lying awake wondering who she had been texting, who had made her laugh that way. I mumbled something back, my voice hoarse, and sat at the table. She slid a plate of toast toward me, her hand steady. Not a single flicker of guilt crossed her face, and somehow that hurt more than anything. If she was lying, she was good at it. Too good. I forced myself to eat, but every bite tasted like ash. I couldn't stop staring at her phone, lying face down on the counter like a sealed envelope. She never used to put it down like that. She caught me looking and offered a small laugh. "You're quiet this morning. Something on your mind?" I wanted to scream, to slam my fists against the table and demand answers, but instead I just shook my head. "Didn't sleep well," I muttered. She tilted her head sympathetically, her eyes soft. "You've been stressed lately. Work getting to you?" Her words felt like a trap, a perfectly placed excuse. If I agreed, it would explain everything. My distance, my silence, the dark circles under my eyes. She was already rewriting the narrative, painting me as the tired husband who'd imagined everything. I stood up abruptly, muttering something about needing air. She didn't follow me, didn't press, just turned back to the sink and started washing dishes, her voice humming that unfamiliar melody again. Outside, the world was painfully normal. Neighbors walked their dogs, cars passed lazily down the street, and the morning sun made everything look warm and safe. I hated it. I hated how ordinary everything seemed while my life felt like it was cracking open. I walked aimlessly, my hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets. I needed proof, something solid, something undeniable. But the thought of becoming that man, the paranoid husband rifling through his wife's things, made me sick. That wasn't who I was. At least, it hadn't been. By noon, I was back at the house. She was gone, off to work, or so she'd said. The silence was heavier now, suffocating. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her purse on the dresser. My chest tightened. If I opened it, I'd cross a line I couldn't uncross. I told myself I wouldn't. I'd wait. I'd give her a chance to tell me the truth. But my hands moved on their own, pulling the zipper open. Inside, I found the usual things: lipstick, keys, receipts, and then, tucked into a small side pocket, a second phone. I froze. It was sleek and unfamiliar, no case, no stickers, no sign that it belonged to her. I turned it over in my hand, my pulse roaring in my ears. The screen was locked, of course, but the wallpaper wasn't ours. It wasn't a picture of us. It was a simple black background with a single line of text. "Don't call me." My stomach turned. I tried guessing the passcode, but after 3 failed attempts, I set it down. I wasn't ready for what I might find. That night, she came home later than usual. She kissed me on the cheek, her lips cool, her skin smelled of lavender. She was a good liar. Too good. We ate dinner in silence. She talked about office drama, a new project, a coworker who couldn't meet deadlines. I nodded and smiled in all the right places, but inside I was screaming. When she went to take a shower, I grabbed the second phone and hid it in my drawer. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew one thing: the truth was in there. That night, I lay awake, listening to the water running in the bathroom. My heart pounded as I imagined all the scenarios. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, unable to shake the images of his face, her voice, and the weight of their betrayal from my mind. The bed felt cold beside me, and for a moment I reached out, half expecting her warmth, only to find the empty space a cruel reminder of the distance between us. My chest ached, not just from heartbreak, but from a strange mix of anger and clarity. I sat up, swung my legs off the side of the bed, and stared at the floor. The carpet beneath my feet looked the same, the house smelled the same, and yet nothing felt familiar anymore. My hands curled into fists as I tried to steady my breathing. I had choices now, and they terrified me. I could leave, pack a bag, and walk out without saying a word. Or I could stay and unravel the truth thread by thread, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to question. That morning, I made coffee, though I barely tasted it. The bitter smell filled the kitchen like a shadow, and I watched the clock tick toward the time she'd normally come down, hair damp from the shower, wearing that soft robe she loved. Instead, she was upstairs, still asleep, completely unaware of the war she'd ignited inside me. I opened my laptop, not out of habit, but desperation. If she had secrets, I needed answers. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the keys, wondering if crossing this line would make me as guilty as her. But then I thought about those whispers in the hallway, the messages she hid, the way she pulled away when I reached for her hand. I had been patient long enough. Her email was easy to access. She'd left herself logged in months ago, and I'd never thought twice about it. My heart pounded as I scanned through her inbox. There it was, messages from him. Some were mundane, but others burned through me like acid. One message caught my eye. "Last night was perfect. I keep replaying it over and over. You looked incredible." I clenched my jaw so tightly it hurt. The timestamps told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't an innocent friendship. This wasn't a work thing or a passing crush. This was betrayal, deliberate and cruel. Suddenly, I heard movement upstairs. I snapped the laptop shut and shoved it aside, my chest tightening with rage and panic. She walked into the kitchen moments later, smiling softly, as if nothing was wrong. She kissed my cheek, poured herself some coffee, and hummed a tune I didn't recognize. I studied her, really studied her. The way she moved, the way her eyes flicked toward her phone sitting face down on the counter. Every gesture felt rehearsed, every smile like a costume. "Did you sleep well?" she asked casually, taking a sip of her coffee. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw her phone against the wall and demand she'd tell me every detail, every lie, every moment she'd spent with him. But instead, I smiled back and said, "Yeah, slept fine." My voice was calm, but inside I was a storm. She kissed my forehead before leaving for work, the scent of her perfume clinging to me like a reminder of her betrayal. As soon as I heard the car pull out of the driveway, I sank into a chair and buried my face in my hands. I had a choice to make. Did I confront her now, while my rage was fresh and raw? Or did I wait, gather every piece of evidence, and let her know exactly what she'd done in a way she'd never forget? For the first time since I discovered her affair, I felt in control. The pain was still there, but beneath it was something darker, a quiet determination. She thought I was blind. She thought she could live two lives without me noticing. But she was wrong. and soon she'd know just how wrong she was. The next morning, the sunlight streaming through the curtains felt almost offensive. How dare the world look so normal when everything inside me was chaos? I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the dent in the pillow where he used to sleep, and for a brief moment, I wondered if I'd imagined everything. Maybe I'd dreamed the argument, the confession, the shattered trust. But then I saw his phone, still lying on the dresser where I'd thrown it after reading his messages. The screen was black, but I didn't need it to glow to remember every word. I got dressed mechanically, like a robot programmed to do basic tasks, teeth brushed, hair tied back, jacket zipped. The only thing I couldn't bring myself to do was eat. My stomach was a knot of acid and emptiness. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from him. 1 voice message I couldn't bring myself to play. I deleted it instead. I couldn't stay in the apartment anymore. Every corner felt like it was whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. The kitchen table where he used to make me coffee suddenly felt like a crime scene. The hallway where we used to kiss goodbye in the mornings felt haunted. I grabbed my bag and left without knowing where I was going. I ended up at my sister's house. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "He cheated, didn't he?" she asked softly, as if she already knew the answer. I nodded, and her expression hardened. She wrapped me in a hug, the kind of hug that makes you feel both safe and completely broken at the same time. We sat at her kitchen table for hours. I told her everything. The way I'd suspected something, the way I'd read his messages, the way he begged for forgiveness. She listened without interrupting, except for the occasional sharp inhale when I mentioned details that were too much for even her to hear. "You can't go back to him," she said finally. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. My voice cracked on the last word. "You don't need to know right now," she replied. "You just need to survive today." That night, I slept in her guest room, but sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him with her, the woman he swore was just a friend. I replayed his excuses, his tears, his desperate promises that it didn't mean anything. But it had meant everything to me. It had destroyed everything. The following day, I went back to the apartment, not because I wanted to see him, but because I needed to reclaim something. My things, my space, my dignity. He was there, sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. When he saw me, he stood up quickly. "I'm so sorry," he started, his voice hoarse. "I'm not here for an apology." I cut him off. My tone was colder than I expected, but it felt good to take control. "I'm here for my things." He nodded, tears pooling in his eyes. "Please, just talk to me." "There's nothing left to say," I replied. I walked past him, grabbing a suitcase from the closet. My hands shook as I packed, but I refused to let him see me cry. He followed me around the apartment like a ghost, whispering pleas I didn't want to hear. "I'll change. I'll do anything. You're my everything." The words felt empty now, like a song I'd once loved but couldn't stand anymore. When I finally zipped the suitcase and slung it over my shoulder, he reached for me. His hand touched my arm, and I froze. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking, "don't leave me." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me. The man I loved would never have done this to me. The man I loved was gone. "You already lost me," I said quietly. Then I walked out. The hallway outside our apartment felt like freedom. I breathed in deeply, my chest aching from the weight I'd been carrying. I didn't know where I was going next, but I knew one thing: I wasn't coming back.
The days that followed felt like living in a house haunted by echoes. Not ghosts, not memories, but echoes of a life that had shattered. Her perfume still lingered on her pillow, And every time I passed the bedroom door, I had to force myself not to look inside, as if the room itself might attack me. I'd never known heartbreak could be so physical, like carrying a boulder on my chest that no amount of breathing could lift. I stopped answering friends' texts. Mark called a few times, his voice on the voicemail carrying a mix of guilt and caution. He didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to hear. Even work felt like a stranger. I'd sit at my desk, open emails, and forget what they meant. My life was now divided into before and after. And after was a wasteland. But somewhere in that wasteland, I found clarity. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about freedom. I was done pretending. Done holding on to someone who'd already let go of me months ago. I packed her belongings one night, folding every shirt, every scarf, every pair of shoes she'd ever left scattered around the house. By morning, the house felt lighter. Empty, yes, but lighter. When she came back for her things, there were no words exchanged. She stood in the doorway, her face pale and unreadable, and I simply pointed to the neatly stacked boxes. She tried to say something, maybe an apology, maybe an explanation, but I held up my hand and walked away. Some stories don't need epilogues. Weeks later, I changed everything. New locks, new curtains, new routines. I even bought a new coffee maker, because the old one still held memories of slow mornings we no longer deserved. Every step forward felt like scraping my knees on gravel, but at least I was moving. One evening, I stood on that same old bridge we'd once walked together, and I carved my own initials into the railing. Not mine and hers, just mine. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't sentimental, but it was proof that I was still here, that I had survived. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised colors, I whispered to myself, she doesn't get to define me. Not anymore. I turned away from the river, feeling like the world was wide open again. Dangerous, yes, but mine.